Hello, hello, hello. How's it going? When we look at Matthew 9 and Luke 5, we can see that Jesus was hanging out with the sinners. And his reason he gives for that is those that are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. For he came to call not the righteous, but the sinners. He came to convert them to following Father and repenting. Then I think that what happened was he was probably arrested with them. And because when you look at Mark 15:7, among the rebels in prison who had committed murder and insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas, or Abba's son, or the son of the Father. You can say it either way. And there was one called Abba's son, bound, laying bound with them that had made an insurrection. Men who in the insurrection had committed murder. That's the different various ways they phrase it. But when I looked at the Greek, it definitely meant that he was in with a bunch of people that had caused an insurrection and they had committed murder and he was arrested with them. That's the way it reads to me. You can look it up in the Greek and see what you think. But he made this point about this as against a robber, so we would connect these things. I'm not sure why this clicked in my head, but it did. Luke 12:2, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Well, when I got to looking into the research of the crucifixion, ancient Romans, this is from a website on the methods that they use for crucifixion. Ancient Romans loved a good crucifixion. It was at one time a primary method used to torture and kill countless numbers of slaves. Crucifixion didn't always involve nailing the accused to the cross. Sometimes the accused was stripped, his head was covered, and he was tied down onto the cross or the fork, and he was flogged, sometimes until he died. Didn't even make it. But the main thing I wanted to note on here was his head was covered. I had never even thought about that. But then when you go and look at Mark 14:65, and some began to spit on him and to cover his face and to strike him, saying, prophesy. And the guards received him with blows. They were fisticuffing him. They've changed this cover his face in a lot of the newer translations to blindfolded him, which is not correct because the word for cover his face is paracalypto, which means to cover entirely the whole surface of the face. So his entire face was covered. Nobody would have known who was up there being crucified, especially after he was pulverized and his face was covered. Okay, and we do know that this face cloth was also in the tomb because in John 26, then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths laying there, and the face cloth was separate, which had been on his head. He makes a point of saying that too. It was not lying with the linens, but folded up in a place by itself. So John is letting us know, again, here is John. A lot of what I pick up from about Jesus comes from John, and I know there's a reason for that. And Isaiah 52 kind of confirms this because in verse 14 it says, just as there are many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form marred beyond human likeness. So nobody would have known that whether it was him or not. And also in Mark 15:19, and they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him and kneeling down to pay homage to him. They were mocking him. Now, I worked many years in an emergency room, and most people have never seen anybody beat to a pulp. So I included this photo. I hope it doesn't gross you out. But I wanted to make an impression here as to, this is river reeds here in the background. And if you got beat in the face with one of them, nobody would know who you were. This is the same girl. This is after she was deformed in a beating. There's no way. And they were striking his head with one of these. So the crowd would not have known if Barabbas was switched for Jesus Christ. And we can say Jesus Barabbas because his name literally was Jesus Barabbas, and then there was Jesus called the Christ. They also did this in order to make it look like he was Yahweh's boy, because Jesus gives us this hint too. Now there in Luke 16:19, and there was a certain rich man, he was clothed in purple and fine linen, living in luxury every day. A certain beggar named Lazarus was taken to the gates full of sores, and desiring to be fed the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table, yes, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The beggar died and was carried away by the angels to Abram's bosom. The rich man who died was buried. In Hades he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abram far off, and Lazarus at his bosom. He cried out and said, Father Abram, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus that he might dip his finger in the water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. So the rich people were clothed in purple and fine linen. And when we read that thing about James earlier, you'll notice that he was clothed in fine linen. Now, when they bring out, it says in Mark 15:17, they clothed him in purple and planted a crown of thorns and put it about his head. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple from him and put his own clothes back on him and led him out to be crucified. In Revelation, we're told that the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and decked with gold. This is giving you a clue as to who it was doing all this stuff. And they were mocking him like he was Jesus Christ by putting this purple robe on him. But he was Jesus Barabbas. He was the real Son of the Father. And so they couldn't send him. They showed him off like that, but then they put his own clothes back on him. It's pretty sick. And this is telling you that this is Yahweh's boy, because he goes into depth in Exodus 28:4. I won't read all this. They take and use gold and purple and scarlet and all the fine linens to make the robes for Yahweh's priest. But he didn't have it when they put his clothes back on him. They had to just make out like he did for a little bit, and then they put him back in his real clothes. In John's version, we see that they paraded Jesus as though he was claiming to be the prophesied Messiah and King of Israel. It says in John 19:1, then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and arrayed him in a purple robe, which would be like the high priest's robe. They came up to him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews, and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him. So Pilate's still saying, I don't find any guilt in this man. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to him, Behold the man. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried, Crucify him, crucify him. And Pilate said to them, Take him yourself and crucify him. I find no guilt in him. Over and over Pilate is saying, I don't find any guilt in him. The Jews answered, We have a law. According to that law, he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. Pilate was scared of this whole situation, it seems. And when they had mocked him, this is in Matthew 27:31, we know that once they've done all this mocking and parading him, then they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes back on him, and then led him away to be crucified. So that's real interesting. They made a spectacle out of him. And did they do that so they would think he was somebody else? I think they probably did. I think that was probably James the Just that going to take his place that had the purple robe, and they put it on Jesus Barabbas and paraded him around after he'd been beat up and pulverized to a pulp, and had his head covered so nobody would know the difference. I know this sounds far-fetched, but I don't really think it is. I think it's really happened. This all starts coming together once you see it, or to me it did. It may be clear as mud to you by now, but okay, in Luke 23:50, we're told about this Joseph character that from Arimathea that takes the body and puts it in this brand new grave. I think verse 50 actually tells us who he is, because it says, And behold, a man named Joseph, a counselor, a good man, and the just. So this would be James the Just, probably, because he's also called Barabbas, and Joseph Barabbas is in Acts. James has given a whole lot of names in here. The same had not consented to the counsel and the deed of them, and of Arimathea, a city of the Jews, who also himself waited for the kingdom of God. I didn't read these words they added, because they add a lot of words. Now, when I looked up this word right here, consented, it means to deposit a vote, to be in agreement. So they voted on what they were going to do. Now, who is they? This goes back, I think, Cleopas is Peter, because I looked that up at one point, and I remember it being the Aramaic for Kepha. It's in the same name thing, but it's in a different language. And we're told in Mark 15:1, as soon as it was morning, the chief priests had a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him to Pilate. Okay, this in Luke 23, I think, is the consultation, where they voted and decided what they were going to do, because it had already been prophesied by Cleopas that nor do they understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation should perish. It was Cleopas who had advised the Jews it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. So they had to come up with some plan to get rid of Jesus. And I think that they actually voted on what they were going to do. It's pretty sad. I put this card in here because there are two negating particles. And a negating particle is like our no or not in English. Like no, he didn't do it type thing. And they use a lot of this in the Greek. It's really, it's mind-boggling. But you've got de, which is a negating particle, and then you have the other negating particle. Well, they always pick up on this one for some reason, and it falls with a subjunctive verb, and the de falls with an indicative verb. And here you can see the subjunctive one, not, it may not pass by. And that would be in no wise pass from the law, okay? But they don't ever pick up on this other one. But I wanted to show you how this works, because it's usually before the verb, but sometimes there'll be a phrase in between, and then the verb will fall over here. But when they're using the de, it has to follow, the following letter has to be a vowel or a plosive consonant. And it has to be used with an indicative verb. So there's 3 rules for de to be read as a negating particle instead of like but or also or even, the other words they use in there. But for it to say no or not, it has to follow those 3 rules. And I gave the website here. If you just Google de etymology, this website will come up with all this information, so you can look it up for yourself. Then I added these 3 cards, and these are just some more things, like you can see how it works here. This would be I am. Then when you add the DEV, which is the long version of DE, it says I am not. So that's what a negating particle does. It turns the sentence around to a negative. And here's some more. It talks about the short version and the long version. And I gave you this website, and this is actually listed under difficult Greek translations, and I don't know, it just had to be Father that I picked up on this. But I just put these in there so you could read through them if you want to. And that's the last page on it, I think. Nope, I was wrong. Those pages were for you to take your time and read through if you want to. If you don't want to, you can go to the wiki site. It's real simple. They give the best, easiest to understand explanation. Here's the 3 civil trials. This is the scriptures we're going to be looking at. And now we're getting into the meat of what happened at the trial. Matthew 27. What I did here was I took what we have in English in our translation. These blue inserts are what I got when I looked at the Greek, and I'm going to explain those after I read through this. And this is Matthew 27, starting in verse 11. And Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor did question him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews? And Jesus said to him, Thou sayest. So he's not admitting to anything. And in his being accused by the chief priest and the elders, he did not answer anything, and that's reaffirmed in verse 12. Then said Pilate to him, Dost thou not hear how many things thou witness against thee? And he did not answer him, not even one word. So the governor did wonder greatly. It made him wonder, well, why is he not answering? Okay, then we go to 15. And at the feast, the governor had been accustomed to release one to the multitude, a prisoner whom they willed. And they had then a noted prisoner called Barabbas. Now, some versions have noted, some have notorious, but the only other place that word is translated, it's notable prisoner. So somebody that was known. Matthew 27:17. They therefore, having been gathered together, Pilate said to them, Whom shall I release to you, Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus who is called the Christ? For he had known that because of envy they had delivered him up. So Pilate knew their real motive. And he was sitting on the tribunal. His wife sent unto him, saying, Nothing to thee, to that righteous one, for many things did I suffer today in a dream because of him. So he's got Pilate's wife warning him also not to kill him. And the chief priests and the elders persuade the multitude that they might ask for themselves Barabbas and might destroy Jesus. Okay, that's confusing in itself, because both of them are called Jesus. So you don't know which one. But when I looked at that verse, the negating particle's in there, and it says the chief priests and elders did not persuade the multitude that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. Which I went, wow, okay. So we keep going. And the governor answering them said, Which of the 2 will I shall release to you? And they said, Barabbas, is what we have in our text. And then I get down here and it said, But the governor said unto them, Who of the 2 do you desire to be released to you? And they said, Not the Barabbas. And that's the actual word that's in there, the Barabbas, which basically means the same thing. It's a different version of the same name. But I thought that was very interesting that those negating particles are in those two verses. Then we keep going. And Pilate said to them, "What then shall I do with Jesus who is called the Christ?" Now there he makes a distinction that this is Jesus who is called the Christ. And all of them said, "Let him be crucified." Okay, and the governor said, "Why? What evil did he do?" And they were crying out even the more, "Let him be crucified." So Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning. He took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves," is what we have. Okay, I looked at that very carefully because I just cannot imagine a Roman officer that's that high up wanting to kill somebody that was innocent when he had a government insurrectionist in there. Okay, and it said, "This is what I got. But the Pilate, seeing that none benefited, but rather a tumult came to pass, laying hold of the water, washed off his hands before the crowd, saying, You shall see, I am innocent of the blood of the just." And that's what his exact words was, the just. I'll show you that slide where I looked at the interlineary on that. I was like, wow. He did not want to kill the just one. And see, the just one was functioning like a high priest in the temple. I'll show you that later too. And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and our children." Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. And that's not what I got in the Greek on that either. This is what I got. Then he dismissed them, not Barabbas. The Barabbas, not the Jesus, he handed over scourged so that he would be crucified. I mean, you can sit and look at these and you can look at the interlineary and see what you think, but I'm telling you, I think that we've been duped over. Then I wanted to talk about this word notorious. We have him in our script as saying that they had a notorious criminal or a notorious prisoner, okay? Well, when you break that word down, it's epi, which means above, and sign, a sign from above. So it's not notorious. In Romans 16:7, it is actually translated in the NSA as outstanding or of note. But technically, when you break that word down into the two compound words it's made from, it means that they had a prisoner with a sign from above or a mark from above, because it's the same word for mark. I think I put that, yeah, bearing a mark, notable. And see, you've got two definitions here, notorious and outstanding. It can't be both. Those are opposites, polar opposites. And judging from the two words it comes from, I would say that it means a sign or a mark from above. It breaks my heart, really. Okay, we're going to look at Matthew 27:20. And this is the one that I got. The high priest and the elders did not persuade the crowds that they request Barabbas but destroy the Jesus. Like I told you, this is confusing because both of them were named Jesus. That's probably why they took Jesus off of Barabbas in some of the translations, is because of the confusion of the wording. But we're going to look at it anyway. You've got two particles. You've got de here and de here. Then you've got a verb here and another verb down here. Let's look at the first phrase first. We're going to take out the high priest and the elders because that is just telling you who the verb is about, and look strictly at the negating particle. We know that if it's no or not, that the following letter has to be a vowel. So you've got a vowel there, and we know that the verb has to be an indicative verb, which to convince is an indicative verb. So this one would be not. Now, why is this one not? The same thing, because to destroy fully is a subjective verb. It's not an indicative verb. So this one would be but. So this would be the rendering that I would come up with. The high priest and the elders did not persuade the crowds that they should request the Barabbas, but destroy the Jesus. And that's how I came up with this. This is something that if you really want to know about it, you're going to have to study it out. I color-coded all this so you can pause and look at, see, this is a DE, it's a negating particle, if it follows these rules down here, in which it follows all three criteria. I included this slide just to show you something here interesting. This is where I took that beginning phrase and threw it into a translator. All I did was take out the elders and the high priest and the elders phrase and put it into without the who it's talking about, and it comes up with the they did not persuade. It picks up on it. Now, I think a lot of the AI have been programmed to pick up on Bible verses. So if you throw the entire verse in there, you get spit out the King James Version instead of what is actually said. You have to either change the names, like I've taken and put it in a common name of just an everyday person, and I get a more accurate reading of what is actually there than I do if I put the whole Bible verse in. It's really strange. It's like they're pre-planning with their AI how to circumvent us even seeing this stuff. But like I said, when I took out that middle phrase and put it in there, it picks up on the negating particle. It's pretty interesting. We're going to look at Matthew 27:21. And what I got on this was, but the governor said unto them, who of the two do you desire to be released to you? And they said, not the Barabbas. How did I come up with that? First off, the verb is said, which is indicative. You've got the de, which becomes a negating particle because it follows the vowel, follows it. I say that backwards every time, but if the first letter is a vowel or a plosive consonant, then it's going to be a negating. So it would, instead of they said the Barabbas, it is they said not the Barabbas. So strange. And I'm not sure why there are a lot of negating words in the New Testament, but there are. Maybe the way Greek is spoken or written. I'm not sure. I hope this is making sense for y'all. This is that verse that I was going to show you, that it shows that he's talking about the just. When it says, you can see the words here, the just, and you shall see. So it could be, I am innocent of the blood of the just, you shall see, or you shall see, I'm innocent of the blood of the just, whichever way you want it. This phrase, like I said, could go either way, in front or behind that. But there's no doubt what he's talking about is the just. He's talking about a person called the just. And they put the just one, and I don't know where they got one from. Shall see to it. I don't know where they got to it. I don't know how they do this, but flat out, that's what I got. Matthew 27:26 is kind of unusual in some ways, but then not really. They've added some words in here. They've got, then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. You can tell this one was lightened. So that word is just put in there, they say, when you listen to them, to make the sentence more smooth in English. But I don't buy that. This is what I'm looking at here. Unto them, for number one, you've got atos, which is them, right here. Okay, it's a datative, plural. They've labeled it as datative. Well, what datative means, it's a case. In a grammatical case, it's something used in language to indicate the recipient or the beneficiary of the action. Well, if that be the case, then when you read the sentence here, then he dismissed them. They are the recipients of the action, of what's done. There shouldn't have been a to in there. And the Barabbas, not the Jesus, he scourged and he handed over so that he should be crucified. And again, this is very hard to tell because you've got two Jesus, and instead of saying Jesus Barabbas and Jesus the crucified, you've just got Barabbas and Jesus. Well, both of them are Jesus. But I'm fixing to show you about this indicative, this negating particle right here, how it follows the indicative verb. First we've got the particle, then we look for the verb. Handed over is an indicative verb. And the negating particle is followed by a vowel right there. So this is how I would read that sentence. Then he dismissed them, the Barabbas, not the Jesus, he handed over scourged so that he could be crucified. I just don't get how they come up with, because the not falls in between the two names. So it would be in between the two names. I watched one guy's video and he was like, oh, you know how Greek is, you just move the words around wherever you want to. I don't think that was the way it was supposed to be either. And they have this as released, but it's actually in other places translated as dismissed. And I think he was dismissing the high priest and stuff and then dealing with this. I hope that made sense. Mark 15. Now we're going to read through Mark 15. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. And they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And we went over that part. That's where they were voting and all. And Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, you have said so. So he's not admitting anything. He's just stating that they're accusing him of this. And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate asked him again, have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you? But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the feast he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection there was a man called Barabbas, or son of the Father. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. And he answered them, saying, Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. Now what I got on verse 11 was, But the chief priests incited the crowd, so that rather than Barabbas he dismissed them. I'll show you the interlineary on that. And Pilate again said to them, Then what shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews? And they cried out again, Crucify him. And Pilate said to them, Why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, Crucify him. So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Okay, now on verse 15 I got, The Pilate was not sufficiently minded or disposed to the people to release Barabbas unto them, and delivered the Jesus scourged to be crucified. And again, here we go again with the names. It would have been much better if he'd have said Jesus Barabbas and Jesus the one they call the Christ, so that we would know exactly what happened better. But they didn't write it that way. Okay, it's implied in Mark 15:7 that Barabbas was among the rebels that had committed murder, but there's no clear statement he was the one who had committed the murder. They've got this worded very differently in the different versions. It's like the Dudum Rhine, which is an 1899 edition. I have that Bible, and it said he was with seditious men who in the sedition had committed murder. And it seems like as these versions get newer and newer, he becomes the position of the one that's the murderer, instead of that he was arrested and in among the murderers. Do you see the difference? It's like they were separate, but he was with them. You can read through these, but I was pretty amazed because the newer versions seem to have changed a bit. Now the Darby down here is kind of an older one. It said, now there was the named Barabbas, because person was in gray, so it wasn't even in there. Bound with those who had made insurrection that had committed the murder. And they inserted him and person. They take on these different things and kind of change up the meaning, because it's really, I mean, to say that you were in the same jail cell with a murderer is a different thing than saying you're the actual murderer, if you see what I mean. Okay, here's an actual interlineary, and this one I think is based off the King James because it's the one I got off the East Sword. When you look at this word, it was which some in the standing did make murder. So somebody in the standing that was in there had committed murder, not him. That's what I'm talking about. They really do a number on this stuff to try to, I don't know if it was a intentional, I can almost imagine that it was because of all the places where that negating particle fall. I mean, they fall in the verses that were the choice verses, like choosing between Jesus Barabbas and Jesus Christ, if you see what I mean. It seemed like they all fell in those situations. And in verse 10, again, we have that datative word for them, which they translate as to them, but I don't think it was, because it was like he dismissed them. It's just a complete thought, you know. To put to in there really did not make any sense to me. But see, but the chief priest incited the crowd, or the common people, so that and they've got him, Barabbas, he dismissed them. Because there's a word in there right here that means rather than him, right there, Barabbas, and that identifies who him is. He dismissed them. Do you see what I mean? That's kind of a little tricky, more of a tricky one to kind of figure out, but it falls right after the verse where he said, for he knew that the chief priests had delivered him out of envy. So, following that train of thought, he's talking about he's dismissing them, not Barabbas. So now we look at 15:15 on the interlineary look, you know, here. You've got the particle, DE, and I questioned whether this one should be not That's why I put that little question mark there, but I think it is. And because it is in front of a plosive consonant, so I'm pretty sure that it is. Should be reading not. And the indicative verb would be release. And like I told you, what I got was the Pilate was not sufficiently minded or disposed to the people to release Barabbas unto them, and delivered the Jesus scourged to be crucified. They added a him in there, and I'm not sure why, because he really didn't need it. And this could be, instead of the Pilate, could be he. Pilate, he was not sufficiently minded, because the is also can be a pronoun. I'm just still seeing the same thing over and over. I think it's more apparent in Luke than it is even in Mark. And we're going to look at that too. Luke chapter 23. Chapter 23, verse 1. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate. Here we have a big crowd, and the high priest and the scribes and the elders and the entire council going to Pilate. So Pilate is inundated with a bunch of people. And they began to accuse him, saying, We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. And their statements are obviously lies, because in Luke 20:24 he says, Show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have? And they said, Caesar's. And he said to them, Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And he knew they were trying to trap him. And then when they said he was calling himself Christ and the King, well, we know that's not true, because he told them not to call him the Christ. In John 6:5, perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. So he got away from the people when they wanted to try to make him a king. And in John 18:36, Jesus said, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from this world. So he made it real clear he was not the king of the Jews. Then in verse 3, and Pilate asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him again. He answered the same way, You have said so. And Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, I find no guilt in this man. So Pilate flat out said, This man is not guilty. But they were urgent, saying, He stirs up the people, teaching throughout Judea and Galilee, even to this place. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and was hoping to see some signs done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but he made no answer. The chief priest and the scribes stood by, and they were vehemently accusing him. And Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, again here we go with the clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. Now, see, this goes back to Mark 15:17, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisted together a crown of thorns, and put it on him. And after they mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak, and put his own clothes back on him, and then led him out to crucify him. So he was not in these fancy clothes to begin with. And in Luke 23:12, and Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before that they had had enmity with each other. I'm not sure why they became friends, unless it was just a common working on this case together. I don't know why that was included. I know there's got to be a reason, but I'm not sure why. Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and he said to them, You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of the charges against him. If Pilate found him innocent, and so did Herod, a Jew himself, also decided he was innocent, Pilate knew they were jealous of him. His wife warned him not to kill him. And then why would he ever send him to the cross? That doesn't make sense with him being a Roman official like that. Barabbas being the other choice, and him being an insurrectionist against the government. That just doesn't make sense to me. In verse 15, neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, there's nothing deserving of death that has been done by him. So Herod also agreed that he was innocent. I will therefore punish and release him. But they all cried together, Away with this man, and release us Barabbas, who for certain sedition in the city and for a murder was cast into prison. Now, that's not what I got on that verse when I looked at the interlineary, and I'm going to show that. I got, who was present by means of sedition, someone made in the city. It said someone, not him, and murder, and was desecrated in prison. So it's basically saying he was raped in prison. but he was thrown in with those from a sedition, and that's kind of the same impression I got from Mark also. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." So that's the second time he said he's going to punish him and release him. But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices were prevailing. Now, what I got in verse 23 was very telling to me. This is when I translated what I got. He did not rest upon numerous voices demanding that he be crucified, and prevailed against those shouting, even the high priest. And then verse 24, so Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. I got, Pilate did not give the sentence that it should be as they required. And I'm going to show y'all these. He released the man who had been thrown in prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. Now, what I got on verse 25 was he did not release to them the one put in prison through insurrection and murder, whom they asked for. He did not hand over the Jesus to the will of them. So I'm considering that he's calling Barabbas Jesus in that sentence. And then verse 26, and they led him away, having taken hold of Simon, a certain Cyrene, coming from the field, and they put the cross to bear behind Jesus. Okay, what I got on 26 was, and they took him away, and they laid hold of Simon, the native of Cyrene, coming from the field, and they laid the cross on the back behind the Jesus. Verse 27, and there was following him a great multitude of people, and of women, who were also beating themselves and lamenting him. And Jesus, having turned to them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but for yourselves. Weep ye and for your children. For lo, days to come, in which they shall say, Happy the barren and the wombs that did not bear, and the paps that did not give suck. Then they shall begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if in the green tree they do these things, in the dry, what may happen? So he's saying right there, if they do this when the tree is green, what in the heck are they going to do when it is dry? Because he knew what was happening. And there were also others, 2 evildoers with him, to be put to death. And when they came to the place that is called the skull, there they crucified him and the evildoers, one on the right hand and one on the left. And Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they have not known what they do. And parting his garments, they cast a lot. And the people were standing, looking on, and the rulers were sneering with them, saying, Others he saved, let him save himself, if this be the Christ, the choice one of God. So they were like, okay, if he's the Christ, then he should be able to save himself. And this is interesting, one on the right and one on the left. Who do you think was on the left and right, drinking the same cup? We're pretty much told. In Mark 10:35, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came near to him, saying, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we will ask. And he said to them, What do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, Grant us that we may sit on your right and on your left hand in your glory. But Jesus said to them, You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? And they said to him, We are able. And Jesus said to them, You shall indeed drink the cup that I drink, and you shall be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit at my right hand or at my left hand is not mine to give, but for whom it has been prepared. When the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant toward James and John. Jesus summoned them and said to them, You know that they who are recognized as rulers over the nations lord it over them, and the great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. But whoever wants to become great among you shall be your servant. Whoever of you wants to become first among you shall be my bondservant of all. For the Son of Man also came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now we know this cup from where he was praying when he said in Matthew 26:39, and going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. So this cup thing goes right back to the prayer in the garden. And in Luke 23:33, and when they came to the place that is called the skull, they crucified him there with the criminals, one on the right and one on the left. And he said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Dividing his garments among them, they cast lots. The people stood watching. The rulers of them scoffed at him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if this is the Christ of God, his chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. An inscription was written over him in the letters of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, This is the King of the Jews. One of the criminals who was hanged insulted him, saying, If you are the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other answered and rebuked him, saying, Don't you even fear God, seeing you are under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong. He said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, Assuredly, I tell you, today you will be in paradise. Now it's interesting because I think James is the one that they called the Christ, but there are two James. And the one that wanted to call down fire from heaven was James the Lesser. That makes sense that they ended up killed with him, and I think that's what happened. Luke 23:19 is the one I got this stuff about the desecration on, and I didn't get exactly the same thing they did when I analyzed it. I got who was present through or by the means of sedition, someone, and that's a definite. I looked this up under the etymology, the ancient etymology, and it says someone had made in the city, and and the murderer desecrated in the prison. So it was like he was desecrated, is the way I'm reading that. And desecration is like the act of treating someone sacred or solemn in a sacrilegious way or disrespectful way, and it could actually even mean rape. So that's pretty intense. But I just wanted to show that to you because when I throw it in the translators, I get desecrated also. So I'm pretty sure that's what it meant. And Luke in 23, the mechanical I got on this was he did not rest upon the numerous voices demanding that he be crucified, and prevailed against those shouting, even the high priest. It was like Pilate made his own decision, is the way I'm reading this. When you look at this, he did not lie upon or rest upon their voices to make his decision. And apokema, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, my pronunciations in Greek are horrible, so I haven't done a whole lot of that in this video, just because I don't have anybody to converse with to actually get the vocals on it happen. I can recognize the words, but I can't vocalize it well. And I guess growing up in Mississippi, that even makes it worse. But here we have that negating particle again, and it's followed by a vowel, and this is an indicative verb. So I'm very sure this is translated correctly. He did not rest upon the voices, the numerous voices, demanding that he be crucified. It's very interesting because this is not what we've been told. And you don't take my word for any of this. You take these verses, and this will be up here. You can go through these and see what you get. Go analyze them yourself, and come back. And if you have comments or you find something different on this, let me know. But right now, it's looking like to me that Pilate did not kill Jesus Christ, and that's why we see him in Rome even way after the Ascension, and that he killed Jesus Barabbas, which was probably the real son. And I don't think he was a murderer either. Okay, this is just where I've color-coded that verse so that you can see it where it falls. And you can see on the verb, when you see that little V, dash, I, and I at the end, that means it's indicative. But I pulled these off of, so you know the resource I'm using, I got these off of Abram Publishing. What the verb, what it falls as, whether it's indicative or subjective or whatever. I mean, I've looked and looked and looked at these things, trying to make sure that I'm not making a mistake. And I know Father knows my heart's in the right place. If I've made a mistake, I made one. And he knows I was only doing what I thought was the best. So I think this is very important to realize what possibly really happened. In verse 24, I absolutely got that Pilate did not give the sentence that it should be as they required. And this is a literal translation, so that could be polished up to sound a little better. But again, we're looking at the negating particle, then it's followed by a plosive consonant, and then the verb is an indicative verb. So it meets all three criteria. I just wanted to show on this one, I put an extra slide because I didn't have room on that other one. Even though this didn't come out translated exactly like the old ancient Greek did, it does show that negating particle is showing up even in a translator. So it's not like I'm making this stuff up. It really is there, I think. And I think that it's just not been translated correctly. Pulled some of these verses to kind of see about how often that negating particle is in there, and it was in quite a few of the text in the Greek. And then I looked at these that didn't even have it, and it's like this one says, and Pilate condemned their request, and he criticized their request. It's still picking up on Pilate not agreeing with their request. And the DE was present about 50% of the time when I just kind of glanced at it. I didn't do an accurate count. I just glanced to see how many times it was in there. And verse 25 is also very important, because what I got on this one was, he did not release to them the one put in prison through insurrection and murder, whom they asked for. He did not hand over the Jesus to the will of them. Now see, that's right there tells me that this probably is the other Jesus, because it's telling you who he didn't release. He did not release Barabbas according to this. And we look at this and we have a negating particle, we have an indicative verb, and it follows a vowel. So it meets all three criteria. And then we can come down here and we look at this one, and it also, there's your negating particle followed by a vowel, and then the verb is indicative. So I just don't see how these could be read any other way. And here's all the vowels. I was just showing that. I'll try to give you as much information as I can. I hope it's not overwhelming.